Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to kick off the new year of Object workshops with Dr. Leonard. She's our first doctor ever, so I'm like super excited. She is the chair of Pediatrics at Stanford and also the Physician-In-Chief at Lucile, Packard. So thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to have you. Would you like to walk us through the slides?
No, thank you. So first of all, congratulations on this program. I was a little intimidated when I went back and looked at who you've had here before and all of their cool workshops, and I'm really fans of some of the people you've brought in. So I think this is a tremendous program, and I congratulate you. So I have 3 different jobs. I'm the chair of the Department of Pediatrics. So within the School of Medicine, there's 18 different clinical departments. There's 350 faculty pediatricians within the Department of Pediatrics. Then I'm the physician-in-chief of the Children's Hospital. There's our brand new Children's Hospital, which just opened its doors back in December. It's across the street, right from the mall. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's quite beautiful inside. And then the other thing that's really important part of my job is in the School of Medicine, there's 5 different institutes. There's the Stem Cell Institute, the Cancer Institute, Cardiovascular Institute, and then there's the Child Health Research Institute, and I'm the director of that. And we're actually renaming it to be the Maternal and Child Health Research Institute because we also do a lot of research on women's health and on mother's health. So often when I talk to people about sort of who I am and what I do, the first question I get is, how did I get interested in medicine and how did this all start? This slide is up here for 2 reasons. One is these are my daughter's cats and I love them very much. And it reminds me to sort of 2 different things. So when I was your age, I really wanted to be a veterinarian. I was sure that's what I wanted to do. I had 2 dogs and 4 cats and read every James Herriot book, every veterinary book that was out there, and that was really what I wanted to do. So I'm curious, first of all, is there anybody here who thinks they might be interested in medicine? Okay, that's 1, 2, good. A couple, okay. How about any of you want to be a veterinarian? Oh, 3, all right, maybe I should give you more time. Anybody who thinks they want to be a veterinarian? Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I loved it, and I volunteered at the veterinary hospital. I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. But then I found this one, I grew up in Seattle, and there was this one veterinarian hospital that had a cardiologist, a veterinary cardiologist, and veterinary gastroenterologist. And I thought, oh, these subspecialties are really interesting and really fun, and went on. And then in high school, I think I was watching a television show just randomly, some documentary or something, and it was talking about surgery on children with abnormal hearts. And then I started thinking, oh, maybe I need to rethink this veterinary thing if you're really interested in the subspecialty. So that's sort of how I ended up getting interested in medicine. The other reason this slide is up here is I was thinking about your program and the fact that they are my daughter's cats. I wanted to tell you just a couple words about her. So she's all grown up. She lives in San Francisco. She had 2 passions when she was your age. She loves art. She loves to paint. She likes graphic design, but she also really liked math. She was really good at math, and she couldn't quite figure out how to make those all sort of fit together. So she ended up getting a degree in statistics. Does anybody know what statistics is? You guys heard of it? Yeah? Any kids? So it's sort of, what is it? What is the discipline of statistics? Any ideas? Yes?
It's like a way to kind of organize your data and see what you have.
Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking about it. Yeah, so statistics is when you have a lot of information and it really helps you to interpret it. So, you know, when we try to understand if patterns we see in our data are just random or if there's really something important that the data are telling us. So it could be about looking at the weather and climate change, or it could be looking at polls and trying to figure out if the votes for 2 different people are really that different. But she couldn't, so she was trying to figure out how does she merge her interest in statistics with her interest in art. So now what she is she's a statistician for a marketing firm, which means you can look at different kinds of art and different kinds of commercials and look at how people react to it. So it's kind of a nice example of how you can take different disciplines and bring them together. So anyhow, so that was sort of how I got interested in medicine. I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions. So I can do a few more and then if any of your questions fit in. And I can tell you when I was in 2nd grade, they called me motor mouth. So you can slow me down, you can interrupt. I try to remember I need to keep that in mind. So then I went to college and decided to major in chemistry, which really fits into, in a minute I'll explain why that really fits into what kind of a subspecialist I am. So anybody here like chemistry? All right, awesome. Why do you like chemistry? Do you know why you like it? Or you just know you like it, yeah? What do you think? I'm curious if somebody likes chemistry. Anybody tell me why? Yes?
Well, I like chemistry because I like creating stuff, I think.
Okay.
And chemistry really helps those two things. Yeah.
Yeah, good. What about you?
It feels kind of like creating, when you put two things together, I think it's really cool that you can create something else, and the possibilities, there's so many of them.
Yeah, that's a great answer. How about you?
I really like chemistry because we get to do all these cool experiments, we get to find out so many things.
That's right. Yeah, the experiments are a really important part of chemistry. Everybody, when you're a chemistry major, you do a lot of labs. Anybody else? I think the reason I really liked it is if you just understand some basic principles, you can figure stuff out. It's not just memorizing a bunch of stuff. You can think through what's going to happen when I put this chemical with this chemical, if I understand something about how chemicals react. So I really like things where if I just have to understand a few basic things, then the rest of it I can figure out. So I'm going to jump in time just for a minute to say what kind of a specialist I am. So I trained in pediatrics, which means you go to medical school for 4 years and you do 3 years to train to be a pediatrician, but I always knew I wanted to be a subspecialist. And so the kind of subspecialist I am is I specialize in the kidney, and it is all about chemistry, because who knows what your kidneys do? What do your kidneys do? Any ideas? Yes?
It's where your
That's right. This is where your pee is made, right? So my kids think that was sort of an interesting choice, and that I look at pee under the microscope at work, but that's exactly what your kidneys do. They make your pee, but your kidneys are incredibly smart, because your kidneys have to regulate how much salt goes out in your pee, how much potassium goes out in your pee, how much acids go out. And there is chemistry every single second, because your kidneys are like filters. The way I explain to parents if their child has kidney disease is each kidney has 1 million filtering units. And the filtering units that filter your blood, because they really clean your blood, that's what your kidneys do. They make your pee, so they get rid of things, you need to get rid of the water you drank, but they also clean your blood constantly. And so they're these little filters, and you guys know what a spaghetti colander is, right? With the little holes, so your kidneys have filters that actually are these little balls of blood vessels with little teeny holes, and they filter your blood, and what comes out is the pee, but those holes have to regulate what gets into your urine. And so it's lots and lots and lots of chemistry reactions. So what I love is if somebody's potassium or sodium or some chemical or some protein in their blood is abnormal, we can measure in their urine. I get out my calculator, we can do a bunch of calculations, we can think about all the chemistry that the kidneys are controlling and the hormones that the kidneys are controlling. So for me, the fact that I loved chemistry in high school, I don't even remember it. I loved it in college. I don't really remember it in high school somehow, but I loved it in college. That's a perfect fit if you want to be a kidney specialist, because we do lots and lots and lots of chemistry. So I didn't know back then, obviously, anything about the kidneys, but I knew I liked the fact that I could figure it out. So I was a chemistry major in college, and then, this is my name tag from 1984. So I came here, I went to medical school here, back before you even had a children's hospital here. So my office now, actually, where I am in the old sort of part of the hospital, used to be the intensive care nursery, and down the hall from me was the intensive care unit because there was no children's hospital. So went to med school, and any questions so far? Anything else that you're wondering about anything I did or why I did it or how something happened or anything?
Why did you choose to work with children?
That's a great question. So first of all, they're really fun and they're really cute, but there's something about this notion that if you can help a child, you save a lifetime, right? And children, frankly, don't have all the complexity of smoking and heart disease and, older adults, there's a lot of sort of chronic disease, but with children, first of all, they're just so resilient. And so it's incredibly rewarding. I like working with the parents. For me, I always knew I wanted to do pediatrics. It was never really a question. It was just a question of what I was going to specialize in pediatrics. But really, we believe in this whole notion of sort of saving a lifetime. One of the things that's really gorgeous about if anybody has a chance to sort of go in the lobby and see the new children's hospital, what I love about it is it's like a natural history museum. It's the first floor is the rocky shores, and it's little otters and and all its cute little baby animals, and the floors have got these beautiful mosaics. But what I love about it is it doesn't feel like a hospital. And it also doesn't feel like a children's hospital, because most children's hospitals are cartoons and primary colors and geometric shapes. And what I really love about the fact that it's like this natural history museum is that the little teeny babies who come to us because they have a very complex congenital heart disease or some cancer, some really serious illness, many of them we're going to be treating for their entire lives. They're going to be with us all the way till they're ready to transition to adult care. And so I like the fact the hospital, I feel like, sort of respects and engages children of all ages. That's one of the nice things about being in the new building. What are their questions? Anything else? Okay, so didn't have a children's hospital here, knew I wanted to subspecialize. My husband and I both went to Stanford Medical School, and we thought, because we're from the West Coast, we thought it would be good to go back east to one of these big sort of East Coast programs. And so I went to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is the oldest children's hospital in the country. It was the first children's hospital. It was founded in the mid-1800s. And it's just a great big children's hospital. It was a really great program. That's where I decided to, so I went there to do graduate from med school, and I got to do that 3 years where you get trained to be a pediatrician. So I did that, and during that decided I wanted to be a kidney specialist. So that's 3 more years where you train to be a kidney specialist. And the way it's set up with the American Board of Pediatrics, there's a requirement during that 3 years where you're training to be a subspecialist, you have to do at least 18 months of research. So I really liked the idea of doing research, but I ended up, because it was sort of where the only real option, working in a very basic science lab with mice. And that's fine. I mean, I think there was really interesting science. But I felt like the science projects I were working on weren't going to help my patients. I just thought, first of all, I'm putting my children in daycare. So I got 2 kids. I put them in daycare so that I can go work in a lab where I didn't feel like I was doing anything that was going to change my patients' lives, right? And I'm like, well, this is not, this project, which was fine, but it wasn't going to change my patients' lives. And I really wanted to do research in my patients on things that would help them. And so but I didn't know I don't know how to do that. I don't even know people who do that. So I would go, at the big American Society of Pediatric Nephrology meetings to the people who were running these big trials, right? The big kind of research projects you hear about in the news where, 200 people get this drug and 200 people get this drug, and you compare and you see which one does better. I just didn't have the training to know how to do that. So I started talking to different people, and I realized that to do that kind of research takes very specialized training, in particular in statistics, right? I hadn't had any training in statistics. So what I ended up doing was taking 2 years at Penn in the Department of Biostatistics and Epidemiology and got a master's degree in statistics and epidemiology. So now I really was trained to do this kind of research. And for the next 14 years, that's pretty much what I did. I ran a big lab, I ran clinical trials, and my research was on bones. And so when we do our workshops, we're going to talk about, when we do our little activity, it's going to all be about bones. And the reason I did it is because of the chemistry that happens when your kidneys fail, your body can't handle vitamin D. So part of kidney failure is you can't process the chemical reaction that happens with vitamin D in the kidney doesn't work, and you can't process vitamin D. And children with kidney disease have terrible, terrible, terrible bone problems. And so I ended up getting this special training and this master's degree so that I could do clinical trials in children with kidney disease to try to do things to make their bones better. So that's what I focused on for a good chunk of my career. Then I decided what was really fun after doing that for a while was helping the people who were like me, the people who were fellows, who were getting trained, who said, I want to do what you do. So I started focusing more and more of my time on finding these young people. And when I look back at them, actually 7 out of 8 of them were women who were pediatricians who said, I want to do what you do. So one was a pediatric gastroenterologist, pediatric rheumatologist, pediatric endocrinologist, pediatric cancer specialist, pediatric adolescent medicine, So all these different people in pediatrics who wanted to do the kind of stuff I was doing, and I was spending more and more of my time focusing, and I actually had a special grant from the NIH for people who help develop junior people. So my focus was really shifting to helping develop the next generation, and that was what I really, really enjoyed. So then for my last 4 years at Penn, there's a picture that reminds that that's what I was focusing on, was bones. And then I took a leadership role where I ran clinical and translational research for the whole children's hospital for 4 years. And that was focusing more on trying to make it a better place for people who wanted to do research and who wanted to be trained to do research. And then the last thing, just sort of gets me to the present, so I was doing all that, and that was great. And then there was this opportunity to be the chair at Stanford. And part of the reason it was really appealing to me is it was a new children's hospital. I don't just mean the new one that opened this year. I mean, it was only they only had a children's hospital here for 25 years. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia just was, 165 years old. I got the sense this place was just really an exciting place in terms of really just taking off and developing all kinds of new expertise. And Silicon Valley, you guys are all from here and born and raised here, and you know this, but when you come from stodgy Philadelphia, this place, the nimbleness, the excitement, the innovation is very different and very exciting for people who are interested in research. So now, this is me with the interns. So these are the people who just finished medical school and now are in their first year of training to be pediatricians. And these are all the wonderful, wonderful young people I get to work with. And so a huge, huge focus of my job now is these guys. So what do you notice about that slide? Yes?
A lot of them are women.
There's a lot of women. Yeah, it's really great. There's some extraordinary women in there. A couple of, there's me in the middle, and the people right around me are the people that run the residency. But, the rows really are, those are all the people that are now just training to be pediatricians. So that's the career stuff. And so let me stop now, since I've given you some big picture, and see what questions people have.
That sounds like a lot of school. How many years were you in school?
Well, I guess you do the math, right? 12 years high school, 4 years, so 4 years for med school, 3 years for pediatrics, 3 years for pediatric nephrology, and 2 years to get my master's. But I'll tell you, it didn't feel like school. When you're in medicine, this is probably true for every discipline, the field is exploding. You have to study constantly. I still feel like I'm in school. The medical literature is exploding. I could even just keeping up on my own field, which is metabolic bone disease in children with chronic kidney disease. Every month there's new publications, so you constantly learning. So sort of where school ended and the rest of your career, there's not that clear line. The other thing is going back and getting my master's. Those, I think, were the best 2 years of my education ever, because I was going back to study something I loved. I was really honed in on, I'm taking these classes because I'm trying to figure out how this training is going to help me improve the lives of the children I take care of. So that 2 years when I got my master's didn't feel like school at all. But if you're in academic medicine and doing research, you're constantly in school.
And what is your day like now as a doctor?
Well, my day life now as a chair is very different than it was. So my days when I was running my research program, that 14 or 15 years, it was pretty much every single day. Let me just go back for a second. The model at Penn, and really the model here, is if you're a physician scientist, which means the bulk of what you're doing is research, we talk about how it's 20-80. So 20% of your time you see patients, 80% of your times you do research. So there was a long stretch when I was 20-80. And that meant I would have 1 clinic a week, and I would take care of patients in the hospital sort of Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 weeks a year. So when you're mostly running a research lab and you're trying to get grants from the National Institute of Health, which is competitive, you really are, your time seeing patients is sort of carved up into discrete bites. So I saw patients on Tuesday, I did a week in the hospital 6 to 8 times a year, and that was it. Now, as department chair, I'm an administrator, so a very large amount of my time is in meetings. And I have to admit, there's a lot of different things. Opening the new children's hospital, running the research institute. So my day now is a lot of meetings. I still see patients. Not all department chairs do by the time you get to this. Kidney specialist is the perfect specialty for a department chair, because when I take care of patients in the hospital, every different childhood disease in some way or another can affect the kidney. So when I was on last weekend, I was on call Saturday and Sunday, we had patients on the cancer ward, we had patients in the intensive care nursery, in the pediatric ICU, on the cardiology floor, we have kids in the emergency department. So we're sort of all over the place. So my job seeing patients is in the hospital, kids either who are kidney patients. Actually, Packard is #1 in the country for kidney transplants. We did 54 kidney transplants last year. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia only does about 22. So we are by far the biggest kidney transplant program. So seeing the kidney transplant patients, I don't do the surgery. There's surgeons who specialize in this, but we take care of them before and after. So I see the kidney transplant patients in the hospital, or I see kids with cancer or cardiac disease where the drugs they get or the things that happen to them as part of surgery affect the kidneys, and we help with that stuff.
And what was the role of confidence in your success?
That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you, it's a couple different, that's a really, really interesting question. I did suffer the imposter syndrome. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the notion of the imposter syndrome. I mean, I would get NIH grant after NIH grant after NIH grant, and I kept thinking that they were all flukes, which of course was sort of silly. I think so there's a really interesting book. Do you guys know this book, The Confidence Code? You guys talked about this book here at all? It's interesting because I watched some of the videos, and some of your other speakers have referenced statistics that come out of that book. It's a really interesting book. And there's something I read in that book that really had a huge impact. So the Confidence Code is written by 2 journalists who, when they went around the world, noticed that when they interviewed women world leaders, there was something fundamentally different in their level of confidence compared to men. So they went out and did all this research on confidence in women. So there's a statistic that I think I saw cited. It was actually a study that was done at HP, but I think I've seen it discussed in this forum. If you take a woman and you take a man and they're at a critical junction in their career, and you say you're going to stretch and take that big leap to the next level. You guys heard about this? So the statistic is, if you say to a woman and man, okay, you're going to take this big leap into this new job, and believe, going from running the Research Institute at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to being the chair of a department of pediatrics was a huge leap. If you're going to take that leap, and you look at the skill set that you need to have at the next high level, what % of the skills do you need to have now before you would take that leap? So what % do you think women would say? Do you guys understand the question? So I'm sitting here running I'm running a piece of a research institute. My budget's about $6 million a year, and I have 60 people underneath me. Now I'm going to become chair at the Department of Pediatrics. My budget is going to be $220 million a year, and I'm going to have 350 faculty and 400 staff under me. Okay, that's a big leap. So if a man is considering the job as chair of the Department of Pediatrics at Stanford, or a woman, so let's take the woman. And I look at all the skills you have to do that new job. What % do you think a woman would say she needs to feel like she has before she would take that job? What? 75. Oh, that's a good sign for you, but that's not the answer. I'll tell you why I like that answer, but it's not the answer if you survey women. Any takers? So the study was done at HP, and it's been duplicated many times. Women say you have to have 100% of the skills. And men say 60%. So that's the confidence piece, because the men have the confidence that they can figure it out. So I'll tell you, my first few days in the job, or maybe my first few months in the job, I would get ready in the morning and I'd look in the mirror and I'd go 60%, 60%, 60%. You only need to have 60%. I didn't know about the way that insurance reimburses the department based on the RVUs that are generated with different payer mixes. That wasn't my world. I came from research. So I think the confidence piece was having the confidence that I didn't have the knowledge necessarily of certain pieces of this job, but I had the skills that I could figure it out. And so I think, it's funny that when you say confidence, that the first thing that came to mind was probably very late in my career, the most recent leap, but that was really the biggest leap, because everything else in medicine is you go to med school, and then the path is really straightforward. Medical school, internship, residency, fellowship, faculty. And so it's interesting, my kids who are not on such a straight linear path and are kind of jealous in a way, or not jealous, but they just feel like for us in medicine, it's so prescribed. It's such a prescription about what you do next, whereas people in tech or in other things, there's not such a clear roadmap. So that's the main thing that comes to mind when you say confidence. Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, well, what is your favorite food?
Pancakes.
With like chocolate chip?
Plain pancakes with nothing on them. Didn't take me very long to answer that, did it? Yeah, and I actually a couple years ago became a vegan, and that's a bit of a problem because I really missed pancakes. But anyhow, yeah, that's the biggest problem. My daughter makes me vegan pancakes, so I'm not strictly vegan, just sort of generally.
Is being vegan good for the bones, or is there like
it's a really good. No, there's not. I mean, I became vegan. Just my mom became vegan, and my 86-year-old mother, and then wouldn't stop talking about it. And I said, okay, fine, I'll try. And then I kind of liked it. I think it just, keeps me from eating, the pumpkin bread at Starbucks. No, actually soy milk. So this is a great question because we're going to talk about bones and calcium and those things. So if you drink soy milk, has a lot of calcium in it. But I didn't do it anything like that. I just did it because I felt healthier. And I'm not that strict about it. And the other thing about being department chair, one of the headaches of being department chair is I have dinners probably 3 to 4 nights a week. Because we either have visiting professors, or right now I'm trying to recruit a new chief of oncology, a new chief of gastroenterology. For each of these positions, we bring 5 or 10 candidates through. There's a dinner for all of them. There's a dinner for every visiting professor. There's a dinner for a lot of dinners with donors. And so it's very hard. I know all the restaurants in Palo Alto really well, and I'm really tired of all of them. But so it's hard. That's since you brought up food, that's the one problem with being the department chair is it's a lot of dinners. And I'll say the other thing is, when I was interviewing for this job, I said something at a time I thought, oh boy, that might not have been the right thing to say. Somebody said to me, a chair of another big department, when they were interviewing me, said to me, are you scared? And it was actually a woman who asked me the question, which is a really interesting question, right? I mean, because maybe she was telling me I should be. But the answer that came out so fast that you knew it came from a really, really visceral place. I said, no, but I would be if my kids were still home. Because the fact that my kids are out of the house means if something's wrong in the hospital, I can stay till 10 p.m. If I have to go out to dinner with donors and visiting professors 4 nights a week, I can, because my kids are out of the house. I think it would be really hard if I had kids in high school because I would go to their sporting events and I would go to my son's lacrosse games and my daughter's gymnastics meets. And so I think that was that sort of said something about the demands of the job. I can be all in, but I do think this would be a hard job if your kids were still home. I don't know if you girls probably don't think about work-life balance, but the moms and your dads probably do more. But that's one thing that this job would be hard. So anyhow, and my husband's very low maintenance. Yes, yeah.
So you just brought up something that I was I'm concerned about. In this area, there is so much competition, and you have such an important role where you're helping so many people. How do you balance work life, take time for your family, take time out for yourself?
Yeah.
And what is your advice for these girls where they're in such a competitive area? And how do we as parents, or maybe that's 2D right there, but finding that balance where we want our children to be competitive and still be kids, and to be on that path for success.
Yeah, boy, there were a lot of things in that question. So let me say, there were a lot of different things. So, when I give my talk annually to my staff about work-life balance, they ask those kinds of questions too. So taking care of myself. So the fact that the kids are out of the house does make it easier, frankly. So I do Soul Cycle religiously. Soul Cycle, yeah. So it's a bit of a luxury, but there's a 7:30 p.m. class, and so I really, really, really try to get there a couple times a week because if anybody who's done it, it's really loud, pounding music, and you're stomping, and I find it very therapeutic. So I think exercises, but my point mainly is exercise is really important. Part of taking care of yourself. So I've always thought that was really important. And when my kids, it's not always easy to fit it into the day. And I'm just so lucky there's a 7:30 p.m. class because I have my day starts at 7 a.m. I have 7 a.m. meetings, almost 7 a.m. meetings every day. So that little part about taking care of yourself. Boy, I'm trying to think through so many of the different pieces of that. So I'll tell you a story. This might be speaking to the moms more than the girls, and then I'll try to and the dads, try to come back to some of their parts of the question. When my daughter was 3, I was heading into work, and she gave her a hug, and she said something to me about, you love your job more than you love me. And I thought, whoa, where? And so I thought, wow, something's wrong. So I talked to a friend of mine who's a child psychiatrist, and she said, Mary, that is on you, because no 3-year-old comes up with that concept. Where no 3-year-olds, that's not going to be something they're going to come up with. So you're doing and saying something. And I realized what I was saying is, oh, I wish I didn't have to go into work. I wish I could stay with you. And so I was reflecting, showing some ambivalence, and she was picking up on it. The minute I stopped doing that and shifted more into how much I loved my job, then the kids were proud of me. It was a really interesting switch. So that, and they're proud. I mean, back when they were little, they were proud of the kind of stuff I was doing. So that whole work-life balance was really just about sort of changing sort of the mindset. My daughter, of course, has no memory of this. However, I do have, and it's on the wall in my office, a bookmark she made me when she was in preschool. And it says hugs, kisses, and then it says too much kidneys. Okay, so I talk, when women are in my office crying about work-life balance, I talk about this, about how it is hard, and just to try to talk about, let's have a conversation about how this really is hard, but that, that you can make it work. The issue of the competitiveness, let me ask you, again, try to get this back and forth a little bit. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, because you're talking about in a culture, in an era that I didn't raise my kids in this environment. And so, first of all, I think this forum is extraordinary. I think another thing that's good about this culture here is you feel in Silicon Valley that there's much, much more permission to fail. The whole startup culture, you get a sense of it's okay if you do something bold and it fails. I mean, I feel that in the research environment on the campus in a way I didn't feel at Penn. So what do you think? Do you think there's more room to fail here and to do something bold and courageous but fail?
Well, I'm not in the tech industry,
yeah.
So, but from being on the outside and looking in, I don't think there is.
Yeah.
Maybe in the tech, for people that are not, I've heard if you're in a job for more than a year, that's a failure, you should be moving around.
Yeah.
But I think for me, and this is, I grew up in this area. I'm 5th generation Palo Alto,
yeah.
So my family were pioneers in this area. So for me, I grew up roller skating through Stanford campus, swimming in the pond, playing at Tresidor, Lake Lagunitas, picking stone fruit. This whole area is very different for me. And so I think about my childhood of running around, not having to worry about traffic and predators. We drank out of garden hoses, and it was non-judgmental. We left the house in the morning, and we came back when the sun went down, and that was that. So sometimes I feel guilty that my daughter can't have the same experience growing up like I did in this area. So for me, I have a difficult time acclimating to it, and then when I see so many intelligent people, I think this area has just a plethora of highly intelligent people. And I think there's a lot of pressure put on our girls because of that. And so I think our kids are overbooked, overscheduled. And, like my daughter does swim team and tennis, and every day she's got something going on. Whereas when I was a kid, I came home and watched TV in General Hospital, and eat Doritos. So
sounds like a really good life.
Yeah.
It sounds like a very good
fast
life.
area to grow up in, and it's so difficult to explain it to people. We didn't have all these buildings, and Altadena was so different, Stanford was so different. So for her, I want her to be successful. I want her to have the confidence. But I want her to be a child because, when she's older, or when our kids are older, there's going to be, student debt, in the medical field. You talk about these people who say, why go into the medical industry? You have debt for years and years and years. And I don't want that to deter my daughter from her passion. I want, all of our kids to find their passion and embrace it. So, and I think the confidence in this area, these girls put so much pressure on each other. Like if they don't get an A in something, these kids aren't out partying like we did in high school. They are hardcore competing against each other for grades. And if they get a B, it's a failure. And it's just, not everyone, we're all our own person. And I think that if we embrace our passion, or encourage our girls to embrace their passion.
Right.
And then maybe that balance is better, but I think, there's one thing to give the confidence in our girls, but I think there's also that part where we need to be supportive in that, because if we want our kids to have confidence, but then we're putting this alternate pressure on them, then that can be confusing and take away from that confidence.
So I'm curious what do you girls think as you're listening to all of this? What are your thoughts? Because I have some thoughts, but I'm really curious what the girls are thinking. Yeah.
I think I agree with you because, like, I don't know, for me in high school, it's kind of hard to, like, do all the things. Like, I like to skateboard and I like to bike around Los Altos, but it's hard because, like I still have to do all my homework and I still want to get really good grades. I don't really know what my passion is, but I need to figure that out. And, like, I want a good job when I grow up, but I don't really, like, but I also want to be able to do all the things I like now, so it's kind of hard, like, when all these kids around you are doing all these amazing things, and you're, like, out here, like, not really sure what you're doing, it's kind of, like,
So the idea of getting your passion, I mean, people talk about this all the time, and whenever I interview any faculty person, I ask them what their passion is. But don't put pressure on yourself to find your passion. I had no clue what my passion was in high school. I don't think I figured out my passion until, like, back when I decided to go back and get that master's degree. Like, really, that was what got me fired up. Up until then, I was just sort of checking the boxes and doing the things I was told I needed to do to sort of progress in medicine. So I worry a little bit when people talk about finding their passion, that if you don't know what it is, you think something's wrong with you. It may take a lot of experimenting. It may take a lot of trial and error. It took my daughter a long time to figure out how her different interests would come together. She knew the things she liked. So don't rush. Don't feel like you have to have your passion figured out, because it may take years before you suddenly go, this is what makes me want to get out of bed in the morning. Yeah.
And I think another difficulty is, like, I love a lot of different stuff, and I feel like doing that stuff gives me confidence, but at the same time, having some time to just do what I want and not be overscheduled.
Right.
Also gives me confidence, and being stressed takes it away, so finding that balance is really hard.
I think that's really right, and I really try, now today is the exception, I really try not to schedule things on Saturdays, and I'm delighted to be here, but I actually, because my work is so fast-paced, I really do try on Saturday to have a day where I can, now, I mean, they don't air General Hospital anymore, but if they did, I would be watching it on Saturday afternoons probably, because I do think it's really, really, really important to take that time to let your brain sort of just shut down and do some sort of mindless stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like it's not just like us putting pressures on ourselves, but under pressure of parents comparing us to other children about like how like, oh, they have like all days, like what are you?
Yeah.
And that pressures us to do better. But like I feel like parents also need to understand that like we're our own person that can't compare us, because like me and that other child are like not the same. Like I have to go at my own pace. I have to go with my own style, and like going into a higher like grade. It's like it gets harder, and parents start getting more expectations, and then you can't do what you want, because like I want to do like wrestling. But like I just don't find time on my schedule to do it, because I'm like so overbooked with my education that like I can't do anything for myself because I want my parents to be happy.
Wow, well I mean, obviously I think those are really, really important things for everybody to keep talking about. I mean, my two kids were so different. One was incredibly driven, overbooked herself, overcommitted, signed on for everything, and the other one was the opposite. This is being videotaped, I can mortify my children. But the other one was just totally the opposite. And so I think it's to some degree that the parents have to understand, let the kids set the pace, let the kids set the agenda, have some some expectations, obviously, in terms of trying their best and doing their best. But I do think it's a really, really important point for the parents to understand to what degree are they imposing some of those pressures. And I remember my husband one day, I was so frustrated with my one kid who didn't quite have it, who was still, wasn't making school a priority and stuff. And my husband said, look, you can't turn him into you. you know, because I was very neat and tidy and organized. And so every time he lost the vocab list, he had to study for his vocab weekly quiz that drove me bananas. And I just had to understand that he was going to mature and all this stuff at his own pace. And he ultimately figured it all out. So it is recognizing how different the kids are and letting the kids set the pace to some degree.
Sounds like me and my brother.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I think this is a great topic, and we can continue to think about it during the activity portion. And you can come and chat with Dr. Leonard at the food time, but now I think is a great time to transition into the activity.
Okay, so I said all my research is on bones. So I've heard this group asks really great questions, and I love the stuff you guys have been saying so far. So what I want you to do is first take a few minutes, talk to the people around you, and I want you to, as you just probably haven't thought much about your bones, take a few minutes, talk among yourselves, and then I want to hear 5 questions of what do you want to know about bones? Yes?
Well, we wanted to know, like, how flexible or hard bones.
Okay, good question. That's a great question, and I think we're going to be able to answer that one. Okay, what's another one? Right here, yeah.
We came up with how do bones develop and grow.
Oh, you read my mind. That's a really good one. Yes? Okay, that's a great one too. So far, we're good. Yeah?
We came up with how, if you break a bone, how does it heal better?
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay. Yeah?
Are there any bones that like break that but like never heal?
Okay. The answer is no. All bones heal. So I think we'll do that one. But these are perfect questions. Anything else?
How do you develop strong and healthy bones?
Okay. I think somebody peeked at my slides. Okay. All right. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. So first thing I'm going to do is show you a picture of the bones in your hand. Okay? So how old do you think that kid is? That kid is 10 months old. So those are the pudgy little hands of a baby, right? I mean, there's just big areas where there's no bones, right? I mean, so so this is the question about how do the bones develop. So I think that's a 10-month-old. I actually removed the age. All right, so here's 3, 6, and 9. So let's stare at this for a minute, and then tell me, what do you notice? What's changing? Right here, yeah.
Well, it's like kind of getting like longer.
Yeah.
Like the hands being like
Yep. Yep. Bones are definitely getting longer. So the bones are they're getting longer. And the other thing is, can you see the bright white along here? That's like the shell of the bone. It's getting thicker. So the bones are getting longer. They're actually getting bigger in this dimension, and the shell of the bone is getting thicker. What else do you notice? Yes?
The gap is like closing in.
That's right. So, and now this right here, so this is you have 2 bones in your arm, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But does anybody have any idea why there's this big gap in the end of these bones? What is that? There's these, right here, you can see in the wrist, there's this line here. Anybody have any idea what that is? Yeah, back here.
Is that like your skin?
No? What?
Maybe a joint?
No, the joint's between the bones. This is the growth plate. Okay? So this is the area where that's cartilage, which means it's sort of like what's in Jell-O, right? It's this area, it's the cells that don't have any calcium in them. So I should step back for a minute. What makes things white on an X-ray is calcium. And that's what you're seeing here. So this area has no calcium because that's the growth plate that's making this new, what it called a matrix, which is sort of like literally like Jell-O. And then the calcium deposits in there. And so as long as this is open, you can grow. I think somebody asked me about how you keep growing. But look at all these new bones that are appearing. Remember, this little baby, he only had like 2 little bones. He's right here. But now look at, there's new bones coming in. See them all in the wrist? Okay, and then you keep going. And now what do you notice? There's a lot of change, right? So what happened to the growth plate? In that 18-year-old, what happened to the growth plate? Yeah, right here, yeah.
Well, it's
Yep. So it's called fused. That bone can't grow anymore. So once the growth plate fuses, there's no way for the bone to get longer. Now this actually came from an atlas. That's it's called Bone Age. There's an atlas of hand-wrist X-rays, and it has every single age, and it's in every radiology department and everywhere that sees children. And it has one for boys and one for girls. And if we're worried that something's not right in terms of somebody going through puberty, like maybe they're not going through puberty correctly, or in kidney failure in particular, we need to see how their bones are developing. We send the kid for a hand-wrist film, and then somebody, without knowing how old the child is, just takes the picture and goes into the atlas and says, this kid has the bones of a 9-year-old, or this kid has the bones of a 14-year-old. That's called your bone age. And they don't know how old you are. They don't think about how old you are based on your birthday. And then the doctor says, okay, my 15-year-old girl has the bone age of a 12-year-old, or my 15-year-old girl has the bone age of a 10-year-old. Something's wrong, right? She's not going through puberty normally. Now, people go through puberty at different rates. So I went through puberty quite late, got my period when I was quite old, and there's normal variability. But sometimes knowing how old your bones are behaving helps us understand what's happening in terms of going through puberty. The other thing is, if you have a disease that makes you not grow, we can give you growth hormone, but we need to make sure that your growth plate is still open, because if it's not, the growth hormone can't really do anything. So once you go through puberty, you stop growing a year or two after you get your period, because that's when your growth plates fuse, because estrogen really affects this process. So your question about stop growing, you get your period, you'll stop growing a year or two later. That's when your growth plates fuse. So that's the main thing in terms of your bone growing. But your bones can actually get denser. You can pack more calcium in them all the way into your 20s. Okay. So one other thing that, since we're in Silicon Valley, forever radiologists have compared the kid's film to this atlas. But that's pretty crude. And if you think about machine learning and what's happening in technology right now, you ought to be able to train a computer to say what somebody's bone age is. So some radiologists and some computer scientists at Stanford just published a paper just in the last few months where they took 13,000 bone age films, fed them into the computer learned through these neural networks and deep learning and machine learning. They trained the computer how to read a bone age, and it worked really well. So this just came out in the medical literature. So they took deep learning neural network model in assessing skeletal maturity in pediatric hand radiographs. And so the idea is, in the future, we'll take a picture of someone's wrist, and we'll have the computer tell us, this is the hand of a 9-year-old, or this is a hand of a 12-year-old, and we won't need the radiologist to literally flip through this atlas with all these pictures. So that's kind of cool. Okay, this is my research lab, and this is a special kind of CAT scanner we have out on a rostradero, and that's my tibia. Okay, so you wanted to know how hard bones are. So this is my tibia. Now, this isn't my tibia. That's my tibia, but this is a tibia. Okay, so we'll pass it around, but in a minute, at the very end, we'll let you guys get your hands on these skeletons. So who was it asked me how flexible and hard they are? Okay, so you can hold that and think about that.
It's real?
It's real. This came from the anatomy department at the School of Medicine. Okay, that's a tibia. So who asked me, how can you make your bones stronger? So that's my tibia. And it's like a pipe, right? So down the middle, and so there's two bones. There's the tibia and the fibula, and you can do a couple different things to make the bones stronger. So who knows what you can do to make your bones stronger? Yes?
Drink milk or like calcium?
Calcium, that's one of the big two. There's another really important one, a big one you guys can all go do today to make your bones stronger.
Drink milk.
That's your calcium. It's not nutrition, it's something else. I want a kid, yeah. Okay, very good. So there are teeny little cells embedded in your bone that have like little sort of little spikes that come out from them, sort of like a little octopus, these little cells. And if you jump up and down, that creates stresses in the bone that sort of tickles these little funny little cells. and they stimulate through a whole bunch of chemical reactions. They turn on some reactions to tell your body to make your bones bigger, to make them bigger this way, to make them stronger on the outer dimension. And this is the coolest study. So the question is, how do we prove that going out and doing weight-bearing physical activity, what you really want to do is stress the bone. The bone is going to respond by making itself stronger. So your bones don't just get longer, they get much bigger. That's really, really important. That's what makes them strong, is how big they are. So if you wanted to do as research, if you wanted to design a scientific experiment to ask whether or not weight-bearing physical activity makes your bones stronger, what would you do? How would you do that experiment? Any thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. So you would do a randomized clinical trial. So you would take a bunch of kids and you would say, I'm randomly going to have these two go out and do weight-bearing physical activity, and I'm randomly going to have these two go do something else. And that's been done, and it was done in Canada. It was called Jump to the Bell. So they took a school, and in one school they had the kids do jumping on and off blocks, and in another school they had them not do it. They just did some other sort of curriculum. And so there's lots of, so exactly what you described, and there's great studies that if you get kids out and you do really good high-impact weight-bearing physical activity, you can make the bones bigger and stronger. But there's really cool examples. So think of a sport, let's see. So what's a sport that just does an incredible amount of weight bearing and loading and putting the bone under, that puts the arms under a lot of stress? Can you think who bears their weight on their arms? Any thoughts? Yeah. Gymnasts. Gymnasts have big bones. They have big bones here and they have big bones here. Because think about the vault, right? I mean, boom. So they really load up their skeleton. Triple jumpers have really big tibias. So there's lots of great examples. But one of my favorite is really clever because it's much easier than going out and doing a randomized controlled trial. Because what you're talking about is comparing a kid who exercises to a kid who doesn't. Can you think of a sport where you're loading and you're exercising one arm but not the other arm? And so instead of comparing two kids, you could compare two arms in the same kid?
It's a little different.
Yeah.
I skateboard, and so one leg, my left leg pushes and my other leg doesn't.
Yep.
And, although
yep.
it does other stuff, I think this calf is bigger than this.
I bet you're right. I think you're right. And so what you're talking about, when we ask kids when we're looking at their legs, we actually ask them which foot do you kick a soccer ball with, because there are side-to-side differences. Where would you see a big difference in what one arm is doing versus the other arm? Yeah.
Maybe a pitcher and baseball.
That is such a good example, and there's an incredible study that's happening right now where somebody is taking people in the 70s who were major league pitchers when they were young, and they're asking, is their pitching arm still bigger and stronger than their non-pitching arm? Because it's a question of, does the difference between the pitching and the non-pitching arms go away when you stop playing? So that's a really interesting study that's happening right now. Any other examples of something where one arm's loaded more than the other? Tennis. So this is a classic experiment that's really cool. So they took girls. So let me just say right now, you guys are exactly the age where such important stuff is happening with your bone. Half of the calcium that's going to be in your skeleton goes into your skeleton in the few years around puberty. So you're right there where you can make a really, really, really big difference. So this is a very clever study. They took elite racket players and they looked at their racket arm versus their not racket arm. And this shows you the percent difference. So the control are kids who are not rackets players. And this is just the fact that if you're right-handed, you're going to have a little more bone in your right hand than if you're, and so everybody has a little bit of a side-to-side difference. But if you're a racket player and you played before puberty, so menarche is when you get your period. So if you're loading that bone in the years up to when you go through puberty, you get a huge bang for your buck. So right now, you go out and do good weight-bearing physical activity, and your skeleton can really respond. We talk of this as a window of opportunity. There is a chance to get in there and make your bones bigger and stronger if you load them. So this is very elegant. It's sort of like what you described, right, where you compare kids who exercise versus kids who don't, but this is even easier because you just take the arm that's loaded versus the arm that's not. And then you don't have to worry, maybe this arm was getting more vitamin D, maybe this arm had different genes, maybe this arm, none of that is a problem anymore because it's all in the same kid. But what's so cool about this is that they showed that it was right before puberty where you get the most bang for your buck. Okay, how are we doing on time? Because I had 2 other things I wanted.
About 15 minutes.
Okay, so it's the Center for Disease Controls and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the CDC all recommend that you guys get out and exercise. Any idea what the recommendations are? How much do you think it says you should be doing exercise a day? Who knows?
Well,
Yeah.
it says 60.
Okay, that's exactly right, 60 minutes a day. And interestingly, in these guidelines, it says at least 3 times a week it should be stuff that's good for your bones. So they really recognize how important this is. It should be moderate to vigorous physical activity, cardiorespiratory activity at least 3 days a week. There should be something that makes your muscles stronger, and there should be something that's good for your bones. So we're going to do a quick activity here. I'm going to pass this around. Let's see, you can, these 2 are different, but it doesn't matter. I just want to sort of mix it up. So what you're going to do, and you're going to need a pen, and I think we have those too. So there's different kinds of physical activity here, and I want you to go around and talk to each other. How much do you guys know each other? Pretty well? Not so well? Okay, okay. Talk to each other. Find somebody who does the different activities that are in this table, and then write their name in the box. And as soon as you have bingo, 5 in a row, whether it's up, down, sideways, then yell moves, and then we'll, after we have a couple people that have got a whole row filled in, we'll stop. But write the name of the person who does that activity, and this is a way for you to learn about the kind of activities each others are doing. And then we'll find out if there's some physical activity that you guys do in Palo Alto that I don't know about, and I didn't put on this table. That you got, and then people can raise their hand if they do that activity.
Rides a bicycle.
Excellent.
Goes swimming.
Good.
Goes hiking.
Okay.
Horseback riding. And plays lacrosse or field hockey.
Excellent. So that's a mix, that's a good example of a mix of weight-bearing and not weight-bearing activity. So swimming is great for you, but it doesn't really do much for your bones. Because if you think about it, your bones just aren't under that force. They don't get that impact, right? They're not really being stressed because it's the bone actually pushing, sort of being squished, compressed, the way it would be if you jumped. That is what stimulates bone formation. So keep swimming. It's great for you in many, many ways. It doesn't do much for your bones. And then bike riding, probably not as good either because it's not weight bearing in the same way. But they're all great activities. What have you got?
Isn't goes bicycling and rides bicycle the same thing?
Do I have that in 2 different boxes? Okay. Yes, it is exactly the same thing. And I was trying to make these up and mix them up. But so if you find, so that's, you're right. Those are exactly the same. 2 different ways of saying bicycling. What have you got?
I have a question actually. So, if you jump like a lot, does it make you taller?
No. Nope. The jumping part makes the bone bigger this way.
Yeah.
Yep, because it's the outside of the bone that expands. So growth hormone and actually testosterone makes the bones expand too. So boys actually have bigger bones than girls. That's part of the reason. That's really a big part of the reason that you don't hear about hip fractures and osteoporosis in old men the way you do in older women, because testosterone makes the bones get bigger this way, and estrogen, interestingly, actually puts more bone on the inside surface of the bone. So the sex hormones do different things. But muscle forces, big strong muscles and strong and loading makes the bone bigger this way, and that's really where you get the most bang for your buck and strength. I'm curious what other activities people are doing. Who else had a move? Do you have one? Can you read me yours?
So does dance, does push-ups, does sit-ups,
Yep.
plays basketball,
Yep.
weightlifts,
All right.
runs or jogs.
Yeah, and I think those are all weight bearing now that I think about it. So weightlifting is good. Basketball is great. You can imagine anything with jumping, running. Those are all great activities to make your bones strong. One more person. Yes, what have you got?
Runs or jogs, acrobatics or dance, plays soccer, plays frisbee, and then plays soccer again.
I wasn't very careful. I got to spiff up these. So you get 2 points for soccer on one and 2 points on bicycles the other. All right, well, this is a great example of the really wonderful mix of sports and activities you guys are all doing, and it's also really good to mix it up. You know, those guidelines say, that you want, an hour every day, but some days, it needs to be things that are good for the bones, some days things that are good for the muscles, so it's a really nice mix. Is there any sport anybody does here that they love that wasn't on any of these tables? What did I miss? I didn't know what people do around here. What? What's that? Oh, soccer's on. It might not have been on yours, but it's on one of them for sure. Or I think I know I made sure I had soccer in there. I knew soccer and tennis would be big ones. Okay, so we're going to do one other. Now we're going to do one other thing, and maybe some of this you guys can do on your own. But somebody said calcium's important, right? So I told you right now. You're building your skeleton. This whole idea of building bones to last a lifetime. The good healthy nutrition and the good physical activity you're doing now is going to prevent and affect your risk of osteoporosis when you're in your 70s and your 80s. We talk about you have a bone bank. You're making a deposit in it right now by getting lots of calcium and doing lots of physical activity. So these are the guidelines on how many milligrams a day you should have based on how old you are. And look at how it goes up. And in those teenage years, it's 1,300 milligrams a day. In adults, it's less than that. Adults is a smaller number because adults aren't building a skeleton. You're putting calcium into your bones every single day. So right when you're at your period where you're growing the fastest, you're putting 300, 400 milligrams a day of calcium into your bones. You're packing it in there. That baby with all that spongy tissue, and then you see the bones get whiter and whiter and whiter and whiter as you grow and get mature. That's because you're packing calcium in there. So it's really important you get your 1,300 milligrams a day. What I'm going to do in the interest of time, you can do this when you get home, but I'm going to pass around, this is a list of sources that are rich in calcium, and when you get home, go through this and think about how am I going to get my 1,300 milligrams a day. So somebody said it already, but what are actually, one of those, I need a cheat sheet. What are the foods that are high in calcium or what? What are the main ones that come to mind? Yeah. Milk. What's another big one? Yeah.
Like stuff that's made from milk.
Yeah, right. So anything has milk in it, and what else? Meat. Not as much. There are some. But really, first, dairy is the big one. So I think that's sort of what you meant by made from milk. So when you look on this, you can see if you drink 1 cup of milk, 8 ounces of milk, there's 300 milligrams right there. But you're going to try to chip away at getting your 1,300 milligrams a day. A little cube of cheese, 1 ounce is not very big, is 200 milligrams. So dairy is the big ticket item. But anybody know what other categories of food are good for calcium? I think this sort of tells you. Yeah. Ice cream is dairy, that's great. Anything with milk in it is going to be good. But let's think about things that don't involve cows. What do you see up there?
Almonds.
Nuts. Nuts are good. And I'm looking for somebody who how about you right there? Yeah, so certain vegetables, so you have to look at this list, right? It's the green leafy vegetables, so kale. A half a cup of kale, that is not very much kale. Gives you 90 milligrams. So your assignment when you go home is work with your family and figure out how am I going to get 1,300 milligrams a day of calcium. Okay? Okay. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 boxes. So these are from the anatomy department at Stanford School of Medicine. This is one side of a skeleton, and this is the other side. And I wasn't really sure what the setup would be, and I was thinking we might want to actually put it together. I don't think we have a great layout for that. But I want you guys to come up and take a look at all the different pieces of the skeleton. And maybe do this in 2 areas. I don't know if you should set one up over there. Maybe
Maybe some people can go and start doing food, and then the other group can.
And so here you can see the spine, okay? So everything's in here. So I'll just give you guys a chance. Now this is the hand, okay? With all those little pieces we talked about. I'm gonna be in big trouble if I don't bring back all these pieces. So we're not gonna take the hand and the foot out of its little container. You can look at it, but let's not take it out other than that. But you guys can break into 2 groups and just go through each of these boxes and take a look at the different parts of the skeleton. Any idea what this is? What do you think? No, this is not the arm. What do you think? It's the femur. So this is the hip. This is the hip joint, and that goes right there. Okay? And then that would be the kneecap, or the knee. And actually, somewhere in there, look at this. Any idea what that is? I think I just said what it is. What do you think?
The knee bone?
That's the kneecap. That's your kneecap right
And
there.
also, who are these from?
So, yeah, it's a great question. So these are really old. These are really, really, really old. They probably were the same ones I used when I was in medical school here in the 80s. But people donate their bodies to science. In fact, both of my parents have said when they die, they'll donate their bodies to science for medical students to learn. Yeah, so I don't know anything about these particular people. I know they're very old. But why don't we just, maybe we'll put one over here. I'm trying to just figure out how to make it to your room. And then we'll let everybody come around and take a look at what's in here. Actually, there's a foot. So there's little pieces, okay? So I'm realizing I went through that box last night, but this box was a little bit different. Any idea what that is? That's your scapula. Let just go back here. Okay, and you know what that is? The sacrum, right? That's right down here in the bottom of your spine. That's like your tailbone. So like your tailbone. All right. Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay. Any of this is collarbone, right? And this is a funny little. This is so here. So it's this little. So here's the tibia. So that's the bone that we showed was the shin bone, and then this little skinny bone right next to it is this bone. It's the fibula. So you have the tibia, which is the one that I passed around. So the tibia and the fibula in the lower leg. The femur, you can see, is this one in the upper leg, and then similarly on the arm. So in the interest of time, I want to give the girls a chance to come move around the boxes. Let's just make sure everything ends up in the same box it came in. And let's not look at the little hands and feet, because you've got an idea of how many little pieces there are. Actually, there's your hand, although it seems like there. See how complicated the wrist is? There's all those bones that we saw developing. The little baby didn't even have those, right?
So maybe before we split up, everyone just come and we